Welcome, everybody. Hey, it's Jason Clemens, Doctor of Chiropractic at the Rock Health and Wellness Center, and this is Life with Jason Clemens, DC. We are live on this beautiful Tuesday, May 13th, right here from the Rock Health and Wellness Center studios in Lubbock, Texas. We're live on the radio at 98.7 Walk by Faith, 1420 AM, 987radio.com, and we're streaming on our social media pages, the Rock Health and Wellness Center, at Health from the Rock, whatever our social media pages are, and Jason Clemens DC on X. So that's what we're doing tonight. I just got caught in I've read my script right there, and then I lost my place. But hey, tonight's going to be an interesting show. I just by request, I had somebody ask if I would talk about anxiety, and I know there's multiple people out there that are dealing with anxiety, and I know we've covered it lots of times on the show, but that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to talk about anxiety. We're going to talk about the effects of trauma on the brain and the body, because a lot of times we just don't understand it. We don't understand. We don't understand what's happening to us. We don't understand the things that are manifesting in our body. And if you get somebody just to walk you through it and just kind of show you some of the things that are happening, that I think it's helpful. And so I got asked about anxiety and chiropractic, and I wanted to just say, how it works. I am not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a licensed counselor. I am a doctor of chiropractic in the state of Texas. That's my license. I have a bachelor's degree in exercise and sports science and a master's degree in sports administration. And I have been in a chiropractic wellness practice I'm in my 21st year as a licensed chiropractor. And I'm in my 25th year of working in chiropractic. And I'm in my 37th or 38th year as a chiropractic patient. So we do functional neurology in our office, and it's chiropractic, it's wellness chiropractic care based in functional neurology. And I want to explain that as we go, and so because we kind of look at it a little bit differently. And you may have a definition of chiropractic that is totally different than what I do in my office. And I had a conversation earlier today about that. And it's like one of my patients is going on vacation, and they said their child said, "Hey, well, we can get you set up with our chiropractor here," and which would be totally fine to get adjusted in that place. But the things that we're doing for this particular patient might not be something that is very common in another office. It's very common in functional neurology offices, but it's not so much common in the regular chiropractic office. And so a lot of times it's misunderstood what we're doing. So I want to walk you through it. I want to walk you through what's going on in the brain when you're dealing with anxiety and trauma. And I want to walk you through how chiropractic can help you. And so you can make a good decision for yourself if you want to, if you feel like, okay, I understand that better now, and maybe I want Dr. Clemens to help me. Maybe I want to take a different approach to how you deal with your anxiety. I don't treat anxiety. I don't treat trauma. That's not the way chiropractic wellness works. What we do is we look for the source of the problem, and then we try to address the source of the problem. We try to figure out what is going on inside your body, what is not firing properly, because I believe that you have an innate intelligence. And I believe that innate intelligence is 100% perfect 100% of the time. And so that's what we're trying to do in the office. So let's just get started on this, because this may take, I have a feeling that we may be going through this the entire show. So, and I mentioned that already. Where did I get my information, right? I got my information from my chiropractic education, and then the hundreds of hours of study that that I've done since then. and and so, but there's four main people that I've learned a lot of this from, and so what I've done is taken this information and brought it into the chiropractic world. Michael Hall is the guy that taught me my functional neurology certification and has taught me a lot. He was the professor at Parker College um, that taught neurology for a long time. I missed him when I was there, so I've had to catch up with him later on. Vessel Van der Kolk wrote a book called "The Body Keeps the Score," and the body keeps the score has a lot to do with what's going on with trauma. He breaks it down very clearly in this book, and I've really broken this book down, and a lot of what you're about to hear tonight has to do with this itself. Um, the Dr. Jordan Peterson and the Maps of Meaning. This this is one of the hardest books that I've ever tried to read. And Dr. Jordan Peterson has taught me a lot. He's a clinical psychologist from Canada. You guys probably know who that is by now. And then the last one is my favorite book, other than the Bible, is The Master and His Emissary. And this is one of the best books that I have ever read in my entire life. I still don't have this whole thing broken down. But Dr. Ian McGilchrist is the one that wrote this book. And it does a lot of explaining about what's going on inside the brain from the right side to the left side of the brain and how the brain works. So what you're going to hear tonight has a lot to do with what all of these guys, these men have taught me and how I've taken it and put it into chiropractic. So what we don't understand sometimes is like everything that's happening inside our body is going on in our brain. And we're our brain goes through stages of development. It starts from day one, and we're going through. I saw that one of the most amazing videos yesterday about an embryo's spinal column and how it forms in the womb. It was really tremendous how it forms and all of those synapses and the billion neurons that's in the spinal cord. And then we get this whole brain, and it goes through these stages of development, and it doesn't stop at birth. You're born, but you're not born with a fully developed brain, and that brain is continuing to develop. And if you go and you hit your markers and you go through the stages, if you get on your feet, you move your feet, you run and play and jump and climb and do all the things that your brain is supposed to do, then your body's supposed to do, then you'll about the age of 25, you start to hit an adult brain, a fully developed brain. Now you'll still learn things and you'll still keep your brain going for a long, long time, but you're going through stages as you grow that sometimes you get stuck in, or sometimes in a traumatic situation, you'll actually reactivate some of these different levels. And so there's different ways, and the brain is actually built from the bottom up. So the brain, when you're born, it's kind of your brain stem, and you just think about everything that a baby can do. Those early stages of brain development right there. Just what happens if you looked at a baby on day one, what is that baby able to do? The brain is working, but it's not a very sophisticated person at that point, right? There's some real simple stuff that's going on. And scientists call that, and from a developmental standpoint, the reptilian brain. It's a very simple brain. I mean, it's doing a lot of stuff, and it's still amazing. Don't get me wrong, but we haven't developed much to it. And then as we start to age, we're going to go through these stages to where, as we go through the days, when a baby cries, if the baby gets attention and understands that there's someone there to nurture them, there'll be someone there to help them out. to pay attention to their needs, that starts wiring the brain in a certain way. Like it'll tell the baby that they have love, they have that nurturing that they need, and there's these pathways that start developing, and it really does shape the way that we see the world. It is these early phases of brain, and we move up to this second level where we call the mammalian brain, and it's the limbic system. It's the development after the baby is born. It's shaped in the response to the experiences. And there's an old adage, there's some new thoughts on it, but neurons that fire together wire together. There's some new thoughts on that, but that if it still kind of holds true to a certain extent. But those are the things that are building over time. And how you see the world has a lot to do with those first 12 years, really 7 years, but that mammalian brain kind of goes to about 12 years old. And then if you add those two brains together, you will get what's called your emotional brain. And it's basically everything that's on the lower part of your brain. So if we were to just take your eyeballs and just draw a line across your brain at about the level of your eyeballs, and then everything that ended up being below that would be considered that emotional brain. It's what a 6-year-old uses to process the world. It's what a 10-year-old uses to process the world. They can get very frustrated. They can get very excited. They could be super excited about things, or they could be very frustrated about things. And that can cause them to be very emotional. And that's kind of what's going on with that lower level of brain. As we go past 12 and we go into our teenage years and we're still moving our feet, we're still doing all those things, and then we keep working and we keep working and we keep working, and we get to about age 25, now we're talking about this upper cortex part of the brain called the mammalian brain, the rational brain. And is only 30% of our brain. Prefrontal cortex, higher brain centers. Now we're starting to act like an adult. Now we can actually have a conversation about stress. One of the difficult things about when you're talking about stress, is that if a person is locked into their lower brain, then you're not going to be able to talk them through their problem, because they're not listening to you in a rational way. They're not listening to you with their upper rational brain. They're locked into this lower brain, and I'll show you kind of how that works as we move through these slides. But I just want you to understand that there's developmental areas of the brain, and that trauma triggers those certain areas of the brain. And so it's hard. There is actual physical, neurological responses to trauma, which you can take trauma and back it down and call it anxiety. If a person's dealing with anxiety and depression, then they're dealing with a dampened level of trauma, a lower level. If you're anxious about something, you're anxious about something that's unknown, and the trauma part of it might have been something that was very. And I'll walk you through it. So the thing about the brain is that there's right side and left side brain. There's upper and lower brain, and there's each one of those areas of the brain has different functions. There's different responsibilities in those areas of the brain. There's also the front part of the brain and the back part of the brain. So there's all those areas have different functions. Okay, the right hemisphere of the brain deals with the unknown world. The right hemisphere, when I say unknown, it's like if you do not know the answer to whatever question you're asking yourself, you're activating that right hemisphere. And it could be anything. It's like you get to the end of the month and it's how are we going to pay the bills? The car payment's coming up. You're about to graduate college and you don't know where you're going to go. You're going to work every day, but you really don't like your job and you really don't like your boss and you really don't know where you're going. And you keep asking yourself, is this all there is to it? Or what am I going to do next? Or how's life going to turn out? Or how do I fix this problem? Right? Those are questions that you're asking yourself, and you're asking yourself questions that you don't know the answer to, and that's activating a part of your brain that's on the right side of your brain. That it's stimulating the neurons that deal with the unknown, because God gave us this brain because in certain times, if you don't know the answer, there's a certain way that you should act. If you don't know how to deal with a certain situation, and mainly in initial phases, it's threat. How would you deal in threat? And I always use the example of a tiger. If you had a tiger that walked into the room right now, what would you do? How would you respond to a tiger? How is this going to work out? Like, I have got to go into what's called my sympathetic or my fight or flight response. And what my brain's going to do is it's going to turn on all of the things that are important for stress. It's going to turn on all the things that are important for fight or flight. That's what it's going to do. And those neurons on that right side of the brain, they have an affinity. They love adrenaline. They respond well to adrenaline. Adrenaline makes your heart beat faster. Adrenaline makes your blood pressure go up. Adrenaline makes your pupils dilate. It's like all those things that would go on in a very stressful way. Those cells that are in the right hemisphere of your brain, they respond better to adrenaline. The cells in the left hemisphere of your brain, the left hemisphere basically does, in a way, it does the opposite of what's going on in the right hemisphere. Once your brain determines that there's no stress, then you now need to worry about living longer. If I don't have a tiger here, then there's a really good chance that I'm going to make it home tonight to eat supper. Then if I'm going to make it home tonight to eat supper, then I'm going to have to understand how to close down the building. I'm going to have to understand how to get home. I'm going to have to drive down the streets. I'm going to have a memory. I'm going to have I'm going to have to be able to pay attention to things. I'm going to have to be able to digest my food. There's a lot of things that are going to be going on if I'm going to live longer. And those are things that are very typically operating in the left hemisphere. That left part of your brain is what deals with all that. Your immune system is dominated in your left hemisphere, and your left hemisphere is a little bit cocky and arrogant because it's never dealing with any threats. It just deals with what it knows. It's like, I know how to get home. Like, I know how to drive my car. I know how to get home. I know how to park in the garage. I know how to do the things. I'm going to eat supper. There's just things I know how to do, and I'm going to do all that in my left brain. So my left brain kind of is arrogant because it knows everything. It just because the right brain protects it from having to deal with things that it doesn't know, right? So the right brain deals with the unknown. It determines when the threat is over. It sends the big picture over to the left brain, and the left brain deals with the known world, and it works out the details of things. Very simple. Right brain is adrenaline. Left brain is dopamine. If the upper brain is working properly, it dampens the lower brain. So if that rational upper brain that we have developed after the age of 12 up to the age of 25, if it's working the way it's supposed to, then it will tell the lower brain to quiet down a little bit. It'll say, hey, it's okay, calm down. And I like to think of the upper brain as the senior class and the lower brain as the freshman class. And I can remember being a freshman, and I can remember being a senior, and there was a different behavior when when a senior kind of is in, like when I get in the huddle, when I was a quarterback of the football team and I was a senior, I never got rattled about anything. I knew exactly what was going on out there. I knew all the rules of the game. It was the most comfortable place I've ever been in my entire life, was on the football field, because I had been playing since I was in first grade. I knew all the rules. I knew everything that was going to happen. I knew how to run all of our plays. I knew what everybody on the team was doing. Like, I had all these known things. There was basically nothing that was unknown to me that was going on. And it just had me in that calm, rational, um, very cognitive, very clear thinking state. That's the way high school football was for me when I was a senior. That's what goes on with that. When that upper brain is working properly, it's dampening that emotional lower brain. It's dampening that limbic system. It's dampening that amygdala, which I'm about to get into, and it keeps everything calm. This keeps the nervous system working peacefully and properly and regulates bodily function. The upper brain keeps the amygdala calm. The amygdala is the memory center of every stressful thing you've ever had in your entire life. It remembers it all. So when we process information, to break it down a little bit more specific, when we process information, the information is going to come into the brain and it's going to go through this area called the thalamus. And the thalamus is kind of the central, I like to think of it as the mix master in a big city. It's kind of the relay station of the brain. Everything's kind of coming in, and then the thalamus just kind of sends it to the different places of the brain. So it's going to hit the thalamus. Input comes into the thalamus. The thalamus sends the input to the amygdala and to the cortex. So as that information is traveling from, it goes into the thalamus, which is central, and then it travels up and down simultaneously. It goes up to the cortex and it goes down to the amygdala. There's a shorter path from the thalamus to the amygdala. So the information that you're seeing is going to hit the amygdala first, then the information is going to hit the cortex up in the upper brain. It's the same piece of information. It's just going to two separate places. But the amygdala gets it first because the amygdala is closer to the thalamus. And then the cortex, the process of getting it to the cortex takes a little bit longer. Have you ever been in a situation where you've been in your house? This happens all the time in my house. Like, Leslie we'll be in the living room together or whatever, and then for whatever reason she goes back into her closet because she's doing something, and then I think of something that I was like, oh, I need to tell her that, and then I go back into her closet, but she's not expecting me to be there, and she turns around and all of a sudden she sees me and then she just jumps. She's like, oh, and it scared her for just a second. Well, what happened in that moment was that when her eyeballs saw me, but she didn't know, she didn't expect me to be there, then what happened was the eyeballs relayed the information to the thalamus sent the information to the amygdala, and the amygdala started the stress response. The amygdala was like, oh, bam, threat. Unknown threat. Why is someone here? They're not supposed to be here. No one's supposed to be here. And it kicks off this threatening scenario. But at the same time, it's sending that same signal of Jason up into her cortex. And her cortex, her rational brain, then sees me and it's like, oh, that's Jason. And that is all happening. That's why you get that little startled experience, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's just you. I didn't see you there. I wasn't expecting you to be there, right? It's like this allows us to respond to the threat before we can think about it. Anytime that amygdala on that right side is going fast, we're not thinking about our response. We're not being rational about our response. We're simply going straight into it. Okay? So then what happens is the cortex sends the signal down to the amygdala and it turns the amygdala off. So when Leslie sees me and it hits the cortex says, that's Jason. It sends the signal back down to the amygdala and it turns it off. And this happens in like a split second. It's like, oh, that surprised me. I didn't know you were there. And then what happens is it sends it down, it turns off the amygdala, and it sends the information over to the left side. And the left side cortex turns off the left side amygdala. And then now we've calmed everything down. That's the normal response. That's the way that the brain works all the time. It does it all the time. All the threats that happen in our world, every time you see something threatening, you're driving down the street, you see something threatening, you see something threatening on TV, you see something threatening on your phone, you're like, all of a sudden, it's like your brain, your amygdala gets it, starts the stress response, then your cortex sends it, your cortex gets it, and it sends the signal down to the amygdala, and it turns it off. That's normal brain response right there. You inhibit the amygdala and send the danger-free information along with the big picture to the left cortex. The left cortex never sees it. They never see the threat. They don't even know what you're stressed out about. That's why they're so cocky. That's why the left brain is so cocky. We're going to take a little break on the radio, and then we'll be right back. You guys stick around with us. This is Life with Jason Clemens, DC. We move along with life, and the parasympathetic response dominates. The parasympathetic is our rest and recovery part of our brain. So when and that's run by the left hemisphere of our brain. So now we can calm down. Now we can relax. Now it's like, I got this, right? And it's pretty cool when you see this and you're like, all right, like that's the way the brain fires. And because if you're having a stressful, if you understand stress and you've been stressed out before, about right now you're starting to look at that and you can already tell where the breakdown happens whenever someone's got anxiety, right? You can see this process and you can say, oh wow, it's like I've fired that right brain. And that's what we're about to get into. But this is the normal. This is the way it should work. And so to say that you should not have a stress response is not real. It's not true. It's not actual neurology. You have multiple stress responses every day. All day they're long, but they're in microseconds. They're happening with your brain. Your brain is processing it. Your cortex is hitting it. It's dropping down to your amygdala, turning it off, moving it to the left brain. Microseconds. We do it. And a person that can handle this properly, a person that has a really good practicing pathway of this neurology is going to be rather calm a lot. Like they're just going to be calm and peaceful. They're not going to be threatened. There's just not much. That's like what I'm saying when I'm on the football field. I'm not saying that I was a perfect football player, and I'm not saying I threw interceptions. And it's like that's where rage comes from. Right? I understand that. I understand where there were things that didn't work out like I thought, but it was like I understand what I did wrong. I didn't see that guy when I threw that ball. It's like he just all of a sudden appeared. That's common, okay? So, but being calm and peaceful, keeping your blood pressure down, keeping your heart rate down, keeping all your digestive tract working like it's supposed to, that's what we're trying to do right there. Let me get us back on the radio. Okay, everybody, we're back. This is Life with Jason Clemens, DC. We're talking about anxiety and trauma tonight, and we're trying to put this on tape so that everybody will have it for the future. So we've talked about the normal response. We've understood, we've broken down the brain, We understand that the lower brain is the emotional brain, the upper brain is the rational brain, and the right side and the left side of the brain operate differently, and we see what happens when things happen the way they're supposed to. Okay? So we've got this area of our brain that's called the prefrontal cortex. Um, and the prefrontal cortex, there's a lot of stuff that's going on with that prefrontal cortex. And that's that upper brain that we're talking about. So this is the area of the brain where we can have body regulation. It monitors heart rate, breathing, digestion when we aren't on high alert. It attuned communication, effectively interacting with others on an emotional level. Emotional balance, navigating ups and downs and avoiding rigidity in our responses. Right? We need to be able to navigate things. We need to be able to understand how things are happening and that they're not always happening the way that we want them to happen, but we need to be rational about the way that we're happening, those things are happening, so that we can get along with each other. Right? We need to have flexibility, the ability to pause and decide what to do before acting. Now, if you think about a 10-year-old or a 7-year-old, a lot of times they have a hard time with that. If they're very emotional, they won't have that ability to pause. They just run right into the next thing. Just run into the next thing. Just get all stirred up about things, right? That lower part of the brain that will get stirred up. We don't have that ability to have peace and calmness, right? Empathy, conscious awareness, and sensitivity towards others' points of view. Empathy is caring about someone else. That happens in that upper brain, and it happens on that right side of the upper brain. Insight, fear modulation, calming the amygdala when it's perceived threats and opportunities. Intuition, informing our decision making by feeling states of the gut and heart. And morality, aware of the larger good and the ability to act, right? Those are the things that are going on in that prefrontal cortex right there. There's an area of the prefrontal cortex that's called the medial prefrontal cortex. And it can restore your balance by helping you to understand that you are responding to a false alarm and abort the stress response. Inhibit, organize, and modulate the hardwired autonomic reactions that are hardwired into the emotional brain. It is crucial to preserve relationships with other human beings. When this system breaks down, we become like animals and go into fight and flight. So we've got an area of our brain, our medial prefrontal cortex, that's helping us whenever that amygdala gets fired up, that it's helping us to calm it down. Okay? We need these areas of the brain to function properly in order to achieve all of those things that I just talked about. In order to keep things calm, in order to get along with others, in order to have rational thoughts, in order to keep ourselves functioning, we need this part of our brain to work. So what happens in a traumatic response? I want to talk about traumatic response, and then we'll talk about anxiety as well. But what happens in a traumatic response? The eyeballs get the information, and they're going to transfer this information into the thalamus. Okay? When the limbic system determines they are in a life or death environment, no amount of insight will silence them. So the input is going to come into the thalamus. The thalamus is going to send the input to the amygdala and to the cortex. The cortex attempts to inhibit the amygdala, but the amygdala blocks the cortex and the sympathetic response dominates. This is trauma, and this is real. This is real physiological neurology. It's real neurology. It's not the Easter Bunny. It's not Santa Claus. It's not made up. Okay, I love Santa Claus. Don't get me wrong, but it's what's happening is when your eyeballs get that trauma, it is so strong, the signal from the thalamus to the amygdala, is so strong, it will trip the amygdala, and the amygdala, so that signal is going to go to the amygdala, and then it's going to go to the cortex, right? The cortex is going to rationally break down what's going on. It's going to get a big picture of things. It's going to rationally determine when the threat is over. And this may be a really quick thing. You may see someone get hurt. You may be getting hurt. You may be involved in some sort of maybe watching something that's very traumatic. It's such a strong signal that it hits the amygdala. So when the cortex determines, number one, the main thing that the cortex determines is that the threat is over. It's so quick. It's like watching the planes fly into the World Trade Center. Like, it's just like bam. It's just like, what was that? And then you see it, and then you see that whole thing. But I'm in North Lake Junior College and getting ready to go to chiropractic school, right? I'm not threatened. My cortex tells me immediately that I am not in that situation. So my cortex is able to send the signal down to the amygdala. But if that signal that went from the thalamus to the amygdala is so strong, it will trip the amygdala, and it will send the signal from the amygdala up to the cortex, and it will block the signal coming from the cortex. It sends its own signal. The amygdala is now in charge. The 10-year-old brain is that trauma was so strong that they didn't know how to process it, that it will now send that a blocking mechanism up. The cortex is sending that blocking mechanism down, but it's being stopped. The amygdala says, nope, I'm not going further. I'm not taking another step. Nope. Nope. We are not sending it to the left brain. We are not getting out of the stress response. The stress response is now dominating because the amygdala has the block on the cortex. That's where trauma kicks in. And what that person may end up doing, the brain is going to ensure that there's no threat in your environment before it moves on to another task, right? Your brain's going to make sure there's no threat in your environment before it moves on. Well, if that amygdala is blocking that cortex, it's not moving on. You're now stuck in trauma. It's like, uh-oh, what are we going to do with this? Now, if you're in this situation, you're going to have a really hard time with this show because from a rational standpoint, you're not going to be able to turn it off because now everything has to work around it. You guys, if you've watched my show for very long, you realize my computer is over here that I'm looking at. My little whiteboard that I use is down here, and the pen that I use, and I need this speaker right here to stay here so that I can be clear on the radio. So I keep this speaker right here in front of me so that I can run my radio show at the same time as I'm running my social media show. But I have to work around this speaker sitting right here. So sometimes I have to lean over. When I'm trying to draw on my little whiteboard down here, I have to work around this speaker. That's what the brain does in trauma. The brain works around the trauma now. It's like everything gets filtered through the amygdala, and it runs around the trauma, and then it goes and then you move on. You move on with your day because you have to, but your brain isn't moving on. Your brain is stuck in trauma. Your brain is activating the fight or flight response. And in nature, the fight or flight response should last about 90 seconds max. You shouldn't have a fight or flight response that's lasting for an hour, or a fight or flight response that's lasting for a day, or a week, or a month, or a year, or another year, or another year. Right? That's not the way that the engine was built. That you can't just put your foot on you can't get in your car and put your foot on your accelerator and take your RPMs up to 8,000, 9,000 RPMs and just run your motor like that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, again and again and again. It's not made that way. You'll burn the motor up. And the body is exactly the same. The body's not made for that. The body's made to have a fight or flight response quickly. The tiger comes in the room and the tiger gets me, or I kill the tiger, or I scare the tiger and we both run away from each other. That's the three things that happens in trauma in nature. It's not, the tiger does not walk into the room and sit down in the room between me and the door and just stay there looking at me and licking its chops and just growling at me for days and days and days. That's not the way it happens. So the way the body is built is the body is built to handle that trauma quickly. You can put your foot on the gas pedal and run the RPMs up there to 8,000 RPMs, but you got to bring your foot off. You can't. It's like 90 seconds. Get your foot off of there, right? This is the traumatic response that's happening. This is overwhelming response that's going on, and there's all kinds of there's things that are happening inside your body when this is taking place. Your current environment can constantly fire the traumatic pathways and take you back to the moment of trauma and cause the physiology you experienced during the trauma to return. One of the biggest problems with the trauma, according to Dr. Van der Kolk, is if you had the ability to move while you were experiencing trauma, if you physically could move your body while you were having the trauma, it helps you move along. But if you were tied down or you were held down in some form or fashion and you experienced the trauma without the ability to move, it makes it more difficult. And you may have environmental factors that are key in that experience all throughout the day, and it'll return you to the stress response. You live on edge between impulse and acceptable behavior. You're trying to make your way through the world, but it's just like any little second, it's like it sets you off. The more intense the visceral sensory input from the emotional brain, the less capacity the rational brain has to put a damper on it. Okay? The more intense the visceral sensory input, you actually have a different part of your nervous system called your enteric nervous system that runs your gut. You have this gut feeling about things, right? You have this intuition, you have this gut feeling. That's part of the vagus nerve that's firing into the brain. So if that is really strong, if that memory of that event is really strong, it will continue to fire that lower emotional brain, and it makes it even harder for that rational brain to turn things off. Trauma affects the imagination. Imagination is absolutely vital to the quality of our lives. It enables us to leave our routine existence and gives us new possibilities. Loss of mental flexibility, without imagination, there's no hope, no chance to envision a better future, no place to go, no goals to reach. That's all from the body keeps the score right there. One of the things that I deal with and I've dealt with in my practice for the longest time, and that's why I get so excited about some things that that we have in the office, like the new machine the new shockwave machine that we got. Those things bring hope back to people who've lost hope. And in a traumatic situation, and you lose the ability to have can you imagine what it would be like to be normal? Can you imagine what it would be like to function the way that you're supposed to function? Can you imagine what it would be like to be happy or feel safe? Right? When you lose that imagination and you lose that hope, it just makes life really tough. If I have one thing that I really, really emotionally love about chiropractic, is it brings hope back to people. It's the one thing that I know that it's just like, Look, this is the way it works. I'm not making any of this stuff up. So it's like, what can we do, right? During flashbacks, brains only light up on the right side and deactivate the left. He saw this under functional MRI. He saw the brains light up. You put the person in the functional MRI, you reenact the stressful situation that they were in, you watch what the brain does. The brain lights up on the right side. It deactivates the left. It deactivates the known. It deactivates the details. It deactivates the attention span. It deactivates the immune system. All of those things that we were talking about on that left side now get deactivated because all we're worried about is the tiger. All we're worried about is the stressful response, causing trouble organizing experiences into logical sequences and putting feelings and perceptions into words. Left side brings words. You speak from the left side of the brain, but the right side of the brain tells it what to say. And so when you've deactivated the left side of the brain, it's one of the things that if you're dealing with someone who's dealing with trauma and you ask them to say to you, how do you feel? Tell me how you feel. When you ask them to verbalize things, they can't do it. And it makes them frustrated and it makes you frustrated because what you're asking them to do is to use a part of the brain that's been deactivated. They don't need words to fight or flight. All you need is the ability, you just have to have your arms and your legs and lots of energy, right? It's hard to identify cause and effect, grasp long-term effect, or plan out a future. After the moment passes, they look for someone to blame. They got to get that. They got to find somebody to blame. That's kind of where the left brain, after the moment passes, the left brain didn't get the big picture. The left brain's now it gets angry. You lose a sense of time and feel only alive when you are experiencing the traumatic past. Traumatized people have a tendency to superimpose their trauma on everything around them. And that's what I'm talking about with this microphone. Everything I do at this desk is wrapped. It has to work around this microphone. The way I move my hands, the way that I draw on the whiteboard, the way that I talk, the way that I turn my head. If I turn my head away from the microphone, it takes away from the radio. So that's what happens in these traumatic experiences. That's what's going on right there. Being traumatized means continuing to organize your life as if the trauma is still going. That's a very tough thing to do, right? It's still right there. So everything new that comes in has to go around that amygdala that's tripped on. Every new encounter or event is contaminated in the past. After trauma, the world is experienced with a different nervous system. And that's a true statement. It is experienced with a different nervous system. Now we've got a flipped on amygdala on the right lower brain that's in contrast with the upper brain on the right side, that's causing deactivation throughout the day of the left hemisphere. It's a different nervous system. It is. Continue to be there and not knowing how to be here. You're continuing to be in the past and you don't know how to get to the future. I've been there myself, not from a massively traumatic experience like a lot of people have experienced, but it's traumatic to me. So it's like it's my own trauma, that my own, whether I made it up in my head or not, it's still my own trauma, and I get it. I went through a period of my life where I couldn't get to the future. I was stuck in the past, and it was that whole experience right there, right? We have this amygdala. It fires the locus coeruleus. This right here is the power of the adjustment. Now we're starting to get a little bit into like, okay, what is happening? What's going on in the body? What is the response that's going on? And this is the poster that I have in my office that when I show people who've had anxiety or trauma or any of that stuff, this is the part that I get. And they, when they see it, they look at it and they're like, That's exactly me. And no one's ever told me this before. But that's exactly me. Okay? This system is in your body. This system is in your brain. You're going to have this emotional response. You're going to have this trauma. And I want to take it right now. I want to just back out of trauma for just a second. And I want to show you where anxiety comes in now. Okay? Because it's the same mechanism. It's just a little bit lower in intensity. The difference to me, and I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a counselor, I'm a wellness chiropractor based in functional neurology. The difference to me is the level of intensity that the thalamus sent to the amygdala. We're not talking about this, and when a person has anxiety, we're not talking about this person that's got this amygdala flipped open and blocking the cortex. We're simply talking about amygdala that's getting stimulated all the time. Okay? It's not overwhelmed, it's just constantly being stimulated by these unknown situations. Because the amygdala is going to fire, it's going to release there's a part of your brain called the locus coeruleus, and that's going to flood your brain with adrenaline. And that when it floods the brain with adrenaline, the right side of the brain has that affinity. It loves that adrenaline more. It has better receptors for the adrenaline. So now the adrenaline is going to activate the right brain, and it's going to kick in your stress response. Your adrenal gland is going to fire. Your adrenal gland is going to release cortisol, and cortisol is going to help you coagulate your blood in case you get bit by the tiger. It's also going to increase your blood pressure and your heart rate with your adrenaline, right? It's going to increase your blood sugar. When you increase your cortisol, you get more glucose released in your body so that your blood sugar goes up so that you can fight or run. You're going to get that is going to kick in. And now there's another part of your brain called your HPA axis. And this HPA axis, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. This hypothalamic pituitary axis is now going to be overstimulated. This is the part where the 90 seconds turns into an hour, the hour turns into a day, the day turns into a week. You're in this unknown situation over and over and over and over and over again. And what happens is we've got this increased firing of this HPA axis. What happens if you fire that for too long? Let me give you the list of symptoms that you will start to see when you fire it for too long. Number one is anxiety. Number two is depression. Accelerated aging. ADD or ADHD. Why ADD? Because details and focus is in the left brain. And if you're activating the right amygdala, you're deactivating the left brain. So you're losing the ability to focus. Type 2 diabetes, your sugar handle is going to go up. Your sugar is going to be out of whack. You're going to gain weight. You're going to have trouble sleeping, and you're going to get high cholesterol. All those things are related to a person that's in a stress response all the time. You're going to get a bunch of stuff. You're going to have digestive trouble. You're going to have metabolism trouble. You're going to have decreased serotonin. You're going to have decreased short-term memory, decreased growth hormones. Like, you're not going to be able to remember anything. But why would you remember anything if you were in the middle of a tiger fight? You don't need an immune system. Who cares about an immune system? You don't need a digestive system because you're not going to digest food when you're stressed out. So you're going to get acid reflux or irritable bowel or constipation or digestive troubles, right? You're going to get sick at your stomach. Your immune system is going to turn off because if you're only going to live 90 more seconds, you don't need an immune system anyway. Your reproductive system is going to turn off. You don't reproduce in the middle of a tiger fight. Nobody does that. So you're going to lose that reproductive power. And then your cycles are going to get all out of whack, or your periods are going to be really heavy, or your testosterone is going to crash if you're a male or whatever. Like, those are things that go wrong. And then the last thing is that posture, because one of the things that the adrenal gland does when it releases cortisol negatively affects the function of your cerebellum. You're going to lose your balance, you're going to lose your coordination, and you're going to lose your posture. So you're going to be slouching all the time. And when you slouch all the time, and someone tells you you need to sit up straight. Well, sitting up straight is going to be impossible, right? So it hurts. You'll say to them, it hurts to sit up straight. It hurts because the part of your brain that's responsible for you sitting up straight has become deactivated. Okay, so man, we covered all that, and we've run out of time for tonight. I'm going to pick this up because tomorrow night is the hope. Bring you back for tomorrow night. What do we do about all this stuff? How does chiropractic help everything you just explained to me? So that's what we're going to do, and I'm going to show you tomorrow night exactly how that works. I'm going to show you like how getting adjusted fires the brain, how moving your eyes in a certain direction, how putting vibration on one hand versus the other. We're going to show you the things that's going to help you get out of this anxiety and this traumatic response that you've been dealing with from a chiropractic standpoint. So I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow night. You guys have a great evening. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help.